Good day, everyone, and welcome to Retro Rabbit's first LinkedIn Live session. A session on unlocking digital disruption. What gives us the right to have a session like this? Why do we want to have the session? Well, the right is Retro is a software design and development company founded back in 2004. We celebrate our 20th birthday in a few months' time. And in this time, we've been designing and developing software for banking, financial services largely. We work across the board because I believe that the principles of digital are applicable to any industry. We have a number of designers specializing in UX UI. Our developers fit across the board in terms of front end, back end, and full stack. And we consider ourselves a technology agnostic company. So thank you for joining us today. Just remember, being on camera is not our daytime job, so go easy on the comments. I'm joined by two of my seniors from Retro, a senior designer, Andrea, and a senior developer, Wesley. Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Andrea. I'm a UX designer at Retro. I'm one of the senior designers, and I've been here quite some time, about over 5 years. So that's me.
Thank you, Dion. I'm Wesley. I've got just over a decade of experience, mostly at Retro. My main responsibilities lies with implementation. So I try and focus on what we implement and how we implement it.
Cool. So on the subject of digital disruption and digital transformation, what does digital transformation mean to you?
So the way I see it as a company pivoting and changing the way they fundamentally work. Because you've got technology that help you gather more data, gives you more insight as to what your customer experience is doing, what is your client base doing, what is your competitors doing, and that helps you make educated decisions. It makes you strategically plan on where you want to go based off the data you're getting.
Thank you, Wesley. Andrea, from a design point of view?
I think from a design point of view, it's where we're taking people from a very analog kind of engagement with your brand or your institution and kind of trying to move you online, whether that's as the customer or as the internal staff, where we're kind of adapting your systems to work fully remotely or digitally as opposed to on some legacy systems that weren't really working so well for the teams.
Yeah, thank you. When I'm asked this question, it's something I always reflect on, right? And we need to be very clear about whether it's digitization or digitalization, and whether we're just moving analog processes into the digital world, or if we're actually building new products and new services for clients. And probably the most important note for that, on that for me, is digital transformation is a journey. It's not a once and done. You don't put a tick in a box and say, we've digitally transformed, and here we go. So in terms of this being a journey for clients, what are some of the common challenges companies face when they contemplate or embark on a digital transformation? Andrea?
Some of the challenges that we've encountered being part of other companies' digital transformation journeys is resistance to change. So from a kind of more process and design side of things, it's difficult when some team members have never worked in an environment where the goal is to create things for customers' benefit, and they don't know how everybody fits into a team, they don't know who to talk to or what role is yours, and so it does get a little messy. But also what happens is they pay lip service to digital transformation. So they do like a blanket update, but they don't actually go and double check that their products are functional after they do like this blanket update or have changed the system. And then you'll often find that there's things they didn't look at or double check that have caused massive cost incurrences or a call center uptake, like that kind of thing. So those are some of the fairly frequent challenges that we've seen.
Yeah. Where's on your side from a development point of view?
So what we've seen is there's a lot of interoperable issues between the new systems and the legacy systems. So with all the new technologies coming in and with all the new implementations that we're seeing, a lot of the older technology and a lot of the legacy systems don't always have the compatibility with what we're introducing. So what we've seen is we need to try and understand what is there and what we need to retain in order to make sure that the business can still operate efficiently as they need to. So a lot of our time is spent in checking this compatibility and determining how we're going to integrate these systems, either through REST APIs or middleware, to try and make sure that they do work together and there won't be any prolonged, let's say, problems with it. Ideally, you want to build it in such a way that you can either pivot if it doesn't work. As soon as you get to the point where you're getting to testing, at which point, after you pivot it, you need to be able to restructure it and re-implement it, or either go to a different technology.
Yeah, I think that agility is key when you're working in this space, right? You can't go in with any preconceptions. One of the things I've also found in the organizations, both current and past, that we've worked on, is this is a journey, and you need to take your people on that journey as well, right? It's hugely important to have people that subscribe to this transformation, that are willing to push their boundaries a little bit in terms of understanding what this can do. So there's great new technologies, there's competitors moving forward at warp speed, as a client, I still have my old back end. How do I approach this integration of new technologies and new innovations in my particular environment?
So from a design point of view, I think we would like to look at what are the problems that you've been encountering with your old systems. And is there a way that we can come up with a solution both with the design team and the development team to kind of find a way to bridge the gap to reduce cost, so that at least there's some value in moving into a more digitized kind of space. And then, that's where we start, is what is the biggest problem. And then sometimes you have to kind of go, okay, well, that's a too big a problem. What are the small wins that we can actually do quicker while we, I don't know, contract with your other IT services to get things built in so we can actually do the things we need to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think bite-sized delivery is quite important, right? I'm going to use the analogy of the elephant quite a few times in this particular discussion, but I think it's one bite at a time. It's a big thing to do. So we take it one. And Wes, from your side, what do you think? How do customers go about approaching this?
So we've seen a lot of legacy systems that are becoming difficult to maintain, difficult to use within the business and within the current technology landscape, just in the way that they've been built in the past. Mm-hmm. So for me, I try and see what is causing the most friction, what is holding up the business from making strategic decisions to help them move forward. So with a lot of the legacy systems, there's a lot of debt from a technical perspective, as well as from a user-based perspective, that you need to kind of revisit and need to look at and see what is some of the nuances that is holding them up to determine what the best way forward would be. So ideally, you don't necessarily want to replace the whole system in one go. Like you guys mentioned now, you want to do it in small consumable pieces. You want to look at some of the smallest viable pieces that will deliver the most value to the company in the shortest amount of time, because that'll help them move forward.
Yeah, so, once again, back to the elephant in the room is digital transformation, often high visibility projects, right? It often has a large number of stakeholders. And have you guys got any examples of projects you've worked on where we haven't always had stakeholders aligned, or in certain rare cases, there's stakeholders that are actively, against this digital transformation that you're doing, and how do you overcome that organizational resistance to change?
I mean, yes, I have encountered that. In the one example that comes to mind, it was an institution had kind of transitioned some of their systems over to like a new function, new system, but from a UX point of view, the usability was extremely low. So what had been on the existing system didn't translate well on the new system, and we had a couple of teams that we were on where they only wanted to do the bare minimum to say, yes, we checked the box. We've now transformed this particular process. And the way that we kind of had to try and get people on board is to explain the cost benefit. So like, yes, we're paying for this development, but we don't want to pay for it twice when we discover, which what we would already guess is a problem for your user. And so you kind of have to get them to see things from your point of view. And if you're doing testing and things like that, it's easy to kind of demonstrate for them from the person who actually has to use it, for them to see, oh, actually, yes, I get it now. You've involved me in the process. Now I'm kind of a little more invested in also taking this journey with you. So that's usually the approach we try to take. So get them involved.
Yeah, I think that inclusivity makes the difference, right? And sometimes it's a hard sell, but it's for the good of the organization.
Sometimes it's a battle, but you do get there in the end.
Where's from your side?
So I've always tried to approach it more from an analytical perspective. Instead of expressing my opinion, instead of trying to have a conversation where we have differing opinions, I'd rather have the data help us make an educated decision on what the best way forward is. So we've seen with some of the implementations that we've done, there would be performance issues as one of the, let's call it, hesitance to change or the back pushing we're getting from the client. And instead of arguing to them what the value is of having a responsive system, we showed them actual research papers from Google where they showed what the drop-off is for a system taking longer than a second to respond. And we aligned that to what our response times is based off of the feedback we're getting out of the system as purely analytical data. And that helps us drive the point through that we need to prioritize it, we need to change the way that we're doing the implementation, because that helps us move forward in that digital transformation process. Yeah.
Makes sense. So, right, I think we're walking the journey.
Yeah.
I just realized that we've been talking about legacy systems, and a somewhat controversial view from my side is legacy systems are not systems that are 20 years old. They are systems that could have been implemented in the last few years, but just can't grow and scale at the rate that a client needs to, right? And sometimes it's quite frustrating for a product owner, for a business owner, to go, well, we just spent a few million doing that a couple of years ago, and now you're telling me it's outdated or it can't scale, right? And consulting companies are often accused of just charging ahead with digital transformation without understanding the risks that come with bringing in a new piece of technology or software and integrating it with what we're calling legacy technology. What sort of strategies do you employ when you have to modernize these legacy systems, and what sort of strategies do you make sure that risks are identified and then mitigated during the delivery process?
That is quite a challenging task because obviously our customers have already invested, as you said. Usually what I would do as a design lead, I'd work very closely with system engineers, architects to kind of figure out, what is actually here and what is possible, so that whatever it is that we design and put in place as the 2.0 or replacement system actually can do its job. So we're not trying to build something that looks nice, sounds great, but then when it comes to implementation doesn't function because, we didn't account for this particular risk or this particular point at the legacy system that can't actually service what we needed to do. It's usually working closely with development, figuring out what the bulk of the risks are right up front, what the challenges will be, the limitations, before you actually go ahead and design something or put something in place. So,
Wesley?
So from a dev perspective, just to build off of what Andrew said, there is a lot of research that goes into our initial planning of trying to determine what the best solution forward is. So a lot of that is understanding the risk, clearly communicating the risk with our client and helping them make an educated decision on what risks they are willing to take and which they are not. So with, let's call it financial institutes, there can be a lot of risk being on the cutting edge of technology. So we try and mitigate that by rather using what the enterprise standard is for some of the implementations. Because we know they're proven technologies, we know they work within the industry because we're working off of past experiences instead of trying to build with the newest, shiniest piece of technology that just came out.
Yeah, I think there's the bleeding edge and there's the leading edge, and but especially with our companies being in majority of our clients being in financial services, you don't want to be on the bleeding edge, right? You want proven technology, you want all of the good things that come with the new technology without a lot of the risk, right? So sometimes it's better to wait for other people to do it first and for it to be proven in a production environment. So digital transformation often seen as a mammoth task, right? It's postponed, to your point earlier, we slim it down and we get to a delivery stage where it's unrecognizable from the original ideas that a client or a stakeholder set out. And when your eventual stakeholder gets it, or the person that's signing off on this project gets it, they're not really impressed because they were sold the full thing and you've got bits and pieces of this, right? So from a company point of view, when we've got this big ask, what sort of advice would you give to them to say, cool, you've got this big piece of work to do, but we're going to break it down into manageable tasks, and how would you go about identifying what those manageable tasks are?
I think it's kind of a similar answer to the one I gave earlier. It's trying to figure out where the biggest problems are first. So where are you maybe bleeding money? Like maybe you've got too much money being spent on customer relationship managers because clients can't even figure out how to log into their banking. Well, it's a small win, and it might be a big one though, right? Because we don't know what the back-end architecture of the logins are. So you kind of have to look through all the problems and figure out, okay, do we already have APIs or any kind of infrastructure behind us to actually implement it from a design point of view, to say, okay, I can take this data, now I can turn it into this interaction that will actually service the customer better or the end user better than it was before, and maybe we reduce then cost. So we kind of have to look at, okay, how long is it going to take? Do we have the infrastructure to actually do this? And is it actually going to solve this problem globally for this institution? You kind of have to start there and try and hope that whatever scale you have from like high impact, low impact versus high effort and low effort, that you're picking the right ones to kind of get the ball rolling at least.
Okay. So from holding on top of what Andrea said, there is basically two parts to this. There's the one part where you want to address some of your concerns and some of your costs that you want to reduce and you want to improve on it. But there's also a different portion where you can unlock new opportunities and new revenue streams that helps to build your organization, helps you to move forward. Mm-hmm. So for me, I try and balance between the two. You don't necessarily want to just focus on improving legacy systems, because that's where we end up in situations where clients don't always feel like they got their money's worth, because it might not be as visually presentable as they expected it to be, because this can purely be on a hosting or on an architecture level where there's nothing visual. It looks exactly the same to them. We're just reducing the cost. But if you're looking at alternative revenue systems, you're looking at taking a company that is only based in web and moving them into a mobile space, which gives them more opportunity to compete within the market. Yeah. Moving some of their business over to a different platform, which again then grows that surface area that they have within the industry.
Okay, that makes sense. So Wes, we've been building, designing, delivering systems for the last 20 years. And in your experience at Retro, when we think about some of those flagship projects that stand out for us as examples of sheer brilliance in terms of what we've done, what we've built, what do you think were the key differentiators between those projects and other projects that perhaps were less successful?
So what we've seen is when we've got a tight collaboration with our client, where they actually come to the table and they are as motivated as we are for the digital transformation, for the implementation, we end up with a much better solution. There needs to be buy-in from both us as well as the client. So we tend to take a lot of ownership of the project, a lot of ownership of the implementation from the very beginning, where they turn it into a concept or just an idea. They come to us with an idea, we break that into the specific requirements that we need in order to make that a tangible deliverable. During that process, we make sure that we cover all the bases we need till the very end to see it through to the end. And as long as the client takes this journey with us and goes through this journey with us, it tends to be a bigger success than when we don't have buy-in from all the parties involved.
Yeah, I've got a point to add to that, but Andrew, I just want to touch in and say what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that is exactly right. Is if the customers are actually our customers, if they're actually kind of in the room with us, they're taking the journey with us, they've bought into the idea, we've managed to kind of show them our value, we tend to have far better results because they're willing to trust you on things they don't understand, and they're willing to trust you to take maybe not major risks, but minor risks where something is, okay, well, let's try it, and it's not that big of a deal if we have to then go back and change it. So if your customers trust you and you've shown them your value, it makes life a lot easier
for them. So, I always find it interesting when I talk to clients and when I talk about the success factors that I look at, an involved, engaged product owner for me is critical to the success of a project, right?
It is.
It's ideally, I don't want to negotiate the politics of an organization, right? I need a product owner that has the priority of the project as their key focus area, and they're able to remove roadblocks, get us into the right discussions, steer us away from the less value-adding conversations. And I find an engaged product owner that holds us accountable and responsible probably for me right up there in the top 3 things that I want in any new project that we're engaging with. So, Andrea, designers are often accused of being, more interested in the softer side in terms of the UX and the UI, and when and ignoring the rands and cents of a project. So, what sort of factors, from a design point of view, what sort of factors should a client consider when trying to work out an ROI of a digital transformation effort?
I mean, there's some fairly old stats from like human-computer interaction that says for every dollar spent on UX, $2 is returned minimum. So if you're just going to take it on what somebody else says, that's a good return. But for us, it's kind of taking the problem and trying to figure out what is the metric we can use to measure whether or not this digital product that we're designing, creating, is actually going to solve the problem. So for example, you might change how the login works on this banking interface, and it will massively reduce call center costs, but you can't see the cost benefit at the login phase, but you might see it at the call center. So the measurement would be how many calls are you getting currently for this problem, and over the next 6 months, how many have you got? And if there's an improvement, that's where you've saved your money or made your money, depending on obviously what the particular task is. So you have to look for the end of the line, sometimes where you'll actually only be able to, at that point, see if what you've implemented on the screen that the customer is going to touch, did this actually work? So you have to build your ROI on things you can measure, not necessarily things you can see and that customers don't even realize have made their lives easier.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm sure many of our customers are breathing a sigh of relief to know that the designers are equally invested.
Yes, we are.
in the return on systems. So, a lot of our clients, large established financial services businesses, running long established, what we're calling legacy systems in the back end, front end, in their environment, right? So when we're building new features, new technology, or putting in a new piece of software, data, which has become critical now as I don't want to say the buzzword, but data is high on everybody's agenda, right? So migrating data seamlessly, making sure that we actually have compatibility between existing systems that we're not changing. We might be building a new front end, we might be building a new piece of functionality that requires that seamless data transformation. How do you go about making sure that happens?
So with a lot of these legacy systems and a lot of the new implementations, you've got a tendency to not have compatibility between them. So what we try and do is we try and establish a clear way of extracting and transforming and loading this data into a platform or into a space. I mean, you can call them data landfills or data leaks or whatever you want to call them. But basically, we set up a streaming of this data information into a centralized database in order to query this information. So that gives you the flexibility of slotting in new pieces of technology that just need to conform to a certain protocol to get the information into a centralized place where you can start playing with it and start transforming it and aggregating it to get the information out of it that you need.
Makes sense. We live in a world that's increasingly characterized by data leaks or phishing attacks. And it doesn't seem like a week goes by without you seeing an article about someone that's lost their information or given access through a back door to people with nefarious intentions. How do we go about thinking about cybersecurity when we're looking at digital transformation? And particularly with legacy systems, right? Because once you're behind the firewall, you pretty much have open access.
So you have that solid exposure. So in terms of security, you need to take a bit of a proactive approach, and you need to identify some of the vulnerabilities you are introducing when you're implementing a new technology or when you're changing the way some of these platforms work and they integrate. So this needs to be effort, and the same amount of effort that you're doing to do digital transformation and to move or to pivot your organization to a new platform. You need to put that same effort into security. You need to go look at what the vulnerabilities are, prioritize them, make sure they are addressed during implementation, make sure you are doing the maximum you can in order to ensure that they cannot easily get to your data and to your customers' data. So we try and collaborate as much as possible with our partners, so in general with clients, because we work in the financial institute, they have a wealth of experience with security. So we try and share a lot of the information, a lot of the architecture, a lot of the implementations that we want to do with them to kind of see what their views are, to see what their concerns are, because that helps us get perspective on how we can better improve the security.
Yeah, you know, it's a point I often make to our clients. Given our experience in that banking, financial services industry, the software that we put out is enterprise ready.
Yeah.
The security levels are commensurate with working in a highly regulated environment and a high risk environment actually. So it's part of our DNA. Andrea, thinking back over your career, there's been many tools that have evolved that hopefully make your life easier, make your life bigger. What do you think? Which tool or product do you think has made the biggest difference in your life as a designer?
I'm going to use one that I think all the designers are going to cheer for, but I think it's Figma. It's kind of become the new industry standard, but what it's done is allowed a lot of functionality that previously was kind of third-partied out from whatever you were using, kind of all lives together. And there's a massive community. You can build your own like plugins and that kind of thing, but it's kind of helped even between sharing from design to development. They've recently added dev mode, which also makes life a lot easier for everyone. So this particular product is kind of all-encompassing, where before you had to have like a million of these things to touch before you got that result. And I think for most of us who are doing this work, it's really just made our lives so much simpler and given us so much more possibility in what we can show our customers, how we demonstrate, how we prototype. So that's been a big game changer over the last couple of years.
And for those people that are not necessarily familiar with some of the updates to Figma, do you just want to elaborate a little bit on the dev mode?
So prior to this, it was very difficult for developers to figure out, okay, like how many pixels is this corner radius on this button, for an example, whereas now the dev mode kind of allows you to show exactly what it is. So it gives you the radius, gives you the background information, gives you the details, all the things you could pretty much copy and paste into your code. In fact, you could probably download the HTML as it is with the CSS if you were so inclined. And it's just made it easier for developers to kind of go, okay, this much spacing between everything. And they've got another feature called auto layout, which also helps us to keep everything consistent without us having to literally go and measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pixels or whatever it is. So I think most of our developers have kind of taken quite a liking to the dev mode. So
quite a game changer for front-end dev, right?
Yes.
Where you don't have to...
You don't have to guess.
Yeah,
you don't have to ask the designer to, can you go and put arrows around everything and say how many pixels everything is? Saves us all time, which ultimately obviously saves our clients time as well.
Absolutely,
so, yeah.
Absolutely. And Wes, from a technology, from a development technology point of view, I quite often make the point that my view of technology is that it's evolved to actually make it easier for us to develop. It makes it easier for us to produce something. And just in your experience, what has been a big game changer or just a game changer?
Big game changer. Dion, you're putting me on the spot. I wouldn't say there's a single thing, to be honest, because we work in a very adaptive environment. So with a lot of our clients, they have their own preferences of what sort of IDEs and what laptops and what OSs we need to work. So we need to be very fluid in which direction we move. We cannot latch onto one because next project we're not going to have access to it. Next project we're not going to be able to use it. So I try and mitigate as much as possible by getting as much exposure between all the different technologies that we do have and that we can use as tools to us.
Yeah, I think one of the sometimes challenges of being a technology agnostic company is we've got to know the different technologies out there. We've got to be prepared to work on it. We've got to be prepared to learn it.
Yes,
and I think that is a big part of our success, is the ability to learn. In terms of our successes in the past, we have a methodology of creating teams and working between seniors, intermediates, and graduates. If you had to pick out one thing that we do differently from a software development point of view to other companies, what would you think it is?
I would say we tend to spend a lot of time just upskilling internally. We spend a lot of time just mentoring and guiding on a team level, where we actually try and make the weakest developer the strongest one. So we actively try and see what you're not good at, and we try and challenge you in that, and we try and point it out to you so you can understand that you need to focus on it. So there's a lot of training that happens organically within our organization that a lot of other organizations don't necessarily do. On top of that, we tend to do more of a hybrid team collaboration between our client and ourselves, where we would do the same knowledge transferring and the same mentoring and the same guidance to our clients, individuals, as well as internally. So that tends to build a fairly strong partnership between us and our clients that helps us, well, let me rephrase it, it helps them to move forward even if we're no longer there, even if we moved on to a different implementation, a different trajectory or a pivot for them.
Yeah, there's a degree of collective knowledge,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
so you're not losing all of them. Andrea, on the design side?
I think we have a similar approach to the developers where we try and offer as much support to the entire team. We're often placed in smaller teams of designers, or we're placed as solo resources at clients, and we teach our designers to have a lot of professional skills so that you're easy to integrate into teams that you've never met before, with companies that are our competitors as well. So we have good relationships where we're trying to show and add value. That's kind of what we try and teach our designers, but also we have a very kind of open design community in Retro, where if you need anything, help with a silly problem or a big problem, you just ask, and one of the other designers who's had an experience like that will be able to help you, or if not, they'll help you find the right resources. So I think that's one thing that's nice, is that at clients sometimes you don't know who to ask, but internally, like, anybody is willing to help you get your job done, and done well. So.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I love about Retro is the fact that we can leverage our collective knowledge and experience, right? And it's not just designers amongst designers, developers amongst developers. It's cross-functional, both from business problems as well as technology problems. And that makes a huge difference, I think, in the way that people carry themselves at client sites, right? Because I'm not relying on my 5 years of knowledge. I've got 1,000 years of knowledge coming from Retro behind me that I can access, which I do think makes a big difference. So, Andrea, in the space of digital transformation being expensive, projects being long, and clients having budgets to adhere to, why do I need a designer on my project? Because my product owner knows what they want. I have developers that can build what they want. Why do I need a designer or designers on my project?
I think often we come from the traditional kind of development space where the spec is written by a BA and the devs just build the interface. But what we all know now is that when we come across interfaces that are hard to work with, it means you haven't had a user experience designer working on it. We take into consideration a whole myriad of things before we actually build something. And as much as our product owners and our stakeholders and our CEOs have these ideas, they aren't necessarily always valid ideas. And that's where designers come in. We help you validate those ideas through testing, through research. But also, once we've come up with something, we validate and we test those exact ideas so that you actually get what you're actually looking for, not what you think you're looking for. And one of the other pitfalls is people tend to think that they are the user. But unfortunately, because those of us who are in the institutions building the products, we have far too much knowledge to consider ourselves the user. So our job as designers is to advocate for the person who's actually going to use it at the end of the day and make sure that it's functional for them and doesn't just make somebody feel like, oh yeah, we put this new feature in, but nobody needs it, and now we've wasted time and money, as opposed to, okay, actually we needed to fix this. That would fix this problem. And that's where design comes in. We look for those kinds of problems, the people-based problems, not necessarily the system-based problems.
Yeah, you know, I think it's the evolution of software design, right?
Yes.
Or software development, actually, that design is such a critical part of it. You know, in the early stages of my career, it was all waterfall. And, you know, you used to have this environment of where the business would put out requirements and the tech guys would disappear for a couple of months. And the first time the business would see it was during UAT, and they go, what is this? I think with Agile, we've gotten a lot quicker to giving the business, and using design in the correct way allows you to prototype, it allows you to test, it allows you to actually get feedback from your eventual users and make changes on the fly. So, you know, I've been in part of many debates where they go, is waterfall cheaper, is Agile cheaper? It's not really a cheaper discussion, right? It's a better discussion in terms of what your clients actually use. And I think we have to help a lot of companies move along to that mindset of where it is. We're going to get something out quite quick. We're going to test it with a user base. We are going to make changes, right? It's not locked in stone. We're trying to understand what you're doing, and we're making sure from a software point of view, it does what you need it to do in the most effective manner
Which is
possible.
kind of why we need to be involved as early as possible usually, because we can help before it's set in stone, this is what we're building. We can help you figure out if that's actually what you need to build as well. So.
Yeah, 100%. So, guys, we've spoken a lot about digital transformation. We've spoken a lot about the challenges associated with digital transformation, which is why a lot of people are actually dialing in and listening to this, because I don't think it's a unique problem. We, as I said, we've got 20 years worth of experience in understanding this environment, delivering in this environment. If you guys had to reflect on some of the projects that you've been part of over the last couple of years, right? What do you, Wes, can you maybe reflect on one that was successful and that you're particularly proud of?
So for me, we took organizations' internal onboarding system, we digitized it for them, where users can self-onboard. So that to me was a fairly big success, because it went from having to physically drive to their office and having to physically speak to someone to manually take them through the system and using the system to onboard someone into their bank to be able to use their business banking, to someone now having to just log onto their laptop, takes them 2-3 minutes, fill in all of the details, it's a sole proprietor and you're on, you're registered, someone contacts you, they send you the login details. To me, that is completely different. That is a big pivot that completely changes the way people view your organization. You've essentially went from being the underdog to being a competitor against some of the bigger players in the same space.
Thank you, Wes. Andrea, before we get to you, I just want to put an offer out to our audience to say that if you've got questions as it relates particularly to digital transformation, as it relates to challenges in the digital transformation space, please pop it into the chat and we'll respond to those as we go. Andrea, your project that you were super successful and really happy?
I actually worked with Wesley on this project he's talking about, and I do think we did a very good job kind of making remote onboarding a reality for this particular institution. But in the same breath, we also, for that same client, built their business banking infrastructure and how it would work. And I think what that allowed us to do is kind of see to a lot of problems that legacy banks couldn't. They're too big, the ship takes a lot longer to turn. And in this instance, it was easier to kind of implement and put things in place that we can be really proud of, that people will find really easy to use, that's functional in its market.
Okay, thank you. I see we've got a question here about what are the legal considerations of selling online, especially internationally. Those looking to expand their online sales footprint are concerned about the regulatory legal aspects of e-commerce, including taxes, privacy laws, and international trade regulations. So, Ian, that is absolutely should be amongst the concerns of a company looking to expand internationally, right? We are software developers, we build software. In terms of the legal and tax implications, there's people we can refer you to, but Retro Rabbit as a consultancy does not do legal advice or tax advice in terms of software that we're building internationally. Andrea, thinking about your career and your trajectory over the last couple of years, what do you think is the biggest difference to someone entering the working world now as a designer versus your earlier engagements?
Well, firstly, you can actually get a degree in UX design now. It's like 17 years ago, not so much. And I think you have a lot more formalized education on what, like people like myself had to learn through osmosis, basically, reading books, figuring this stuff out. And they have a lot of advantage in that the information's already there. When I started doing this, there was very little information on what actually UX is, what does it do, how does it help us. Now you can find hundreds of YouTube channels with this information, boot camps, courses, and so the advantage is that all the things that took us long to learn, those of us who've been doing this a long time, you can learn in a very short space of time. However, those of us who've been here a long time also have the benefit of experience, having seen a lot of challenges, a lot of specific problems to solve. But if you're coming into the industry now and you're working with somebody who has experience, that is the benefit, is that you don't necessarily have to go through those pains to learn the same lessons. So, yeah, they're very fortunate.
Okay. And in terms of clients in that time, do you think they've become more accepting of design or more demanding of design?
Both, I think. I think the environment has definitely evolved. Even if we just look 5 years ago, what some of the institutions thought we did versus what we actually are kind of asked to do now, there's been a good evolution. There are some institutions that are very mature in their UX practice and others who are just getting started. And I think that for us as Retro, it poses a really great challenge because we have some people who can come and help you mature your practice as well, just from an experience point of view. So, yeah.
Okay. Evolving.
Yes, it's evolving.
So where's, I'm assuming you were a few projects in before you had to work with the designer.
Yes, we definitely did not have the design, let's say at Forge that we have now, we definitely did not have the design backing we had now or have now currently. So a lot of the first implementations we did was not the best user interfaces. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't think developers should be building user interfaces. They don't always understand the softer side of things. They don't always understand some of the nuances and the problems that people face with using systems that we build. Developers in general have more of an engineering mindset, so they care more about the data that goes behind it and data that gets captured instead of how it gets captured, instead of the experiences you have to go through. So we always tend to focus more on the implementation and how it needs to work instead of what some of the problems are that they face. So it's more analytically based, more architecturally oriented.
Okay, and with that in mind, right, understanding at a company with a substantial number of developers and designers, I'm always trying to balance the needs and the requirements as well as just the personality differences between devs and designers. But as a senior, how would you go about in your current projects and your new projects building a culture of inclusivity where design's heard, development's heard, and we want to collaborate. That's why we're here, right? We're not working in silos.
So I always try and have people come with actual analytical data. So if I take a design's example, what they would do is they would build different interfaces. They'll do user testing to try and determine what users prefer and what users' perspectives are. And that analytical data helps give them that reputation, that helps include them in the conversation. Because a lot of times, because developers are more analytical, they want to see actual evidence to prove it. You can't just come with an opinion. Opinion is not going to help you move along with it. They like to see hard evidence of the opinion or decisions you are making while you're making them. So that definitely helps with the inclusivity.
Okay. And Andrea, from your side, as the designer, often malaligned and sitting on the outside looking in?
I think the challenge always is to make sure that you actually know what you're talking about, that you're able to talk about your work effectively. So when I'm engaging with Wesley, I make sure that he understands what I'm saying from his point of view, not necessarily just my point of view. But as he says, yes, data helps. I think the challenge comes in where it's like qualitative data, where it's how the customer feels about something, where you're trying to now justify changes on that front. But if you've built a good relationship with your team leads or your architectural leads, you generally will be able to have a dialogue that's productive to figure out, okay, so if this is what I'm saying should happen, and you're saying, okay, but there's this limitation, you have to work together. You have to kind of build that social capital between the two teams to be able to work with each other effectively, obviously mostly for your customer and their end users. And it's not really about those of us who are making the product in the end.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the challenges, and some of this might be reiterating what we've said before, but if you could give your clients on your next project a cheat sheet in terms of accelerating their digital transformation project or the success of that project,
okay,
what would you put on that cheat sheet?
User research is a requirement, early, not late. Have a good set of designers that know how to work with developers. You need BAs who are open-minded, a good product owner, as you said before, and you definitely need leads who are also very good at what they do, but also open. Open to talking about things they don't understand, open to discussing, finding a way forward as two disciplines. And I think if you have those roles within your team, regardless of what problem is going to come your way or challenge or whatever it is that your company is going to give you to sort out, if all those people are in alignment, that you work for the good of your business or for the product, that's kind of how you cheat the system. You make sure that they all work well together. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's I think we should just encapsulate that in a blog post, because it really is as a result of the learnings that we've had over the last couple of years. And,
Yes.
and it's unfortunate that some large projects just fall into that same trap over and over again. And within sometimes the same organization.
Yes.
Right? We would hope that they learn the lesson once, but I think that's part of our role as consultants, is to actually help them walk that journey and
Yes.
educate them in these sort of changes. And where's from your side, from a dev side?
Oh, it's going to be difficult to add to that. I think she covered most of it. But I do think with a lot of the push where you're actually trying to improve on what you already have, you need to have a baseline of what sort of data or what you're trying to achieve. So you need to understand what your kind of problems are that you're facing, and you need to be able to analytically measure those problems. Because if you can measure them, then you can see what the improvements are that you made. So you can actually determine whether or not the changes you made did actually help you improve. Did you actually manage to transform the digital landscape you currently, or the digital implementations you currently have, in a positive way?
Okay, makes sense. So Andrea, the good news is we have a developer here saying all those things
Yes.
in the cheat sheet, largely led by design. So well done. I think he's been converted. So there's a question, and I'm not going to read the entire question, and I'm going to try to paraphrase it. And basically says, in the age of rapid digital transformation, how do you navigate the balance between embracing cutting-edge technology and for innovation, and ensuring inclusivity and accessibility for users? So from a development point of view, I made the point earlier, right? We want to be innovative. We want to help our clients walk that journey, but by the same time, it has to be battle-proven, tested technology, right? So we know that it's reliable and trustworthy. I'm not too sure about the inclusivity and accessibility. So can you help me out from a design point of view?
Yes, I can. So this actually is quite a big issue, actually, specifically in South Africa. So inclusivity and accessibility applies to people who aren't the same as you and I. So they might have some visual impairments, they might have some physical impairments, and how do we then assist them to engage with our digital products? And like in a lot of countries in Europe and in the US, there's actually laws in place that require you to make your products accessible and inclusive. And in South Africa, technically we've adopted those, but we haven't seen it implemented. So for example, if you are blind and you're using a banking app, if you use a screen reader, it's going to read your balance out to everybody in your vicinity. So it's things like that that need to be taken into consideration for all of our products, and that's kind of where UX comes in as well. It's something that we're supposed to be keeping in mind. We're supposed to be trying to test and implement that, especially if we know who our user base is going to be. We'll know, what kind of percentage of people are going to be using this that have a specific kind of impairment, so whether it's visual, audio, or physical. And those are the kind of things that we have to champion. Not many places in South Africa are actually doing that. So if you're somewhere and they're doing these things, hats off to you. But if you're not, as a UX designer, it's your job to make sure that it's known and to do it wherever you possibly can.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. I think it's key, right? As we are part of a more diverse and inclusive world, that we actually take the blinkers off in terms of understanding that. I suppose we could have a separate conversation, though, about the actual size and the scope of diversity and inclusion, because I think it's also critical to understand what does the client's customer base look like, to your point. Where do they engage with this product, service, feature, and
there's
take that
nearly
into account?
2 billion people in the world with some form of disability in this space. So if you're not catering to them, you're also missing out on a massive market where you could potentially be making money.
Yeah, agreed. But it's about understanding that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where's anything to add from your side there?
So from my side, I do think there can be more of a concern with accessibility as well. If you look at Africa as a whole, not everyone has access to internet, not everyone has access to smartphones. So if you're trying to cater for that market, then you need to look at implementing more of a USSD interface or interface where they can physically go to a bank where it's easier for them to use it instead of just limiting it to mobile or just web-based. Because that does limit some of your access you have and it limits the people that can use it.
Yeah, you know, I can't even begin to tell you the number of conversations I've had with clients sitting in very nice head office buildings, and we're talking about what they'd like to build, and there's a large part of their market that's actually excluded, right? Because if you look at us around the table, there's 90% overwhelming one type of device or one type of operating system, but the actual target market or the core of their market doesn't use that, right? We walk into buildings where we have access to Wi-Fi, understanding what that is in the more rural areas, and not just access to Wi-Fi, access to data, but the cost of accessing that data, which I think is super important when we build systems as well, right? Is understanding how much of data we're using is absolutely critical. So Wes, if you were to do a piece of free consulting for any one of our clients or potential clients watching this, what is the thing that you'd like to build or you'd like a client to consider building in a corporate environment that can leverage either their size, their market, or whatever their unique value propositions are?
So what I've seen with a lot of the clients we've worked with, they don't always have a consolidated view of all of their systems and all of their data points and all of their data information that they're not capturing. So a lot of them would implement onboarding systems, they implement a web-based system, but they don't have a clear understanding of the data they are capturing. So as soon as they have a consolidated view, it'll be easier for them to know which direction to move and to make an educated decision of what points of the organization they need to focus on. So for me, I feel like a centralized reporting system would definitely benefit them.
Okay, cool. Andrew, from your side?
I mean, pie in the sky here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love if our financial institutions would build kind of a bridging tech where if somebody's using e-wallet, send money, cash send, all that stuff, that based on my phone number and who I primary bank with, I can opt for an EFT as opposed to actually having to physically draw the cash. It's just a pet peeve. Can we build that, please?
So our banking clients might argue that PayShap was designed and conceived to solve that particular problem. I think the challenge is the actual interfaces that it has in terms of being all-encompassing. But you know, it's a debate that I have quite often amongst my circles, is the international move to less cash. But the challenge that we have in a South African and African environment of you have a cash-based economy and then you have a card or an electronic-based economy, and over the long term your solutions need to take care of both, right? From a customer centricity point of view. I suppose, guys, as we come towards the end of this podcast, a few more questions around Retro specifically. So why do you think clients should opt for Retro as opposed to a different company?
So I think this is going to fall back on what I explained earlier on. We tend to take ownership of a lot of the technical implementation. We take ownership of the projects to a level that organizations don't always understand. We don't let the bureaucracy and the politics hold us back. We centrally focused on delivering exceptional projects and exceptional solutions to them, and we're not going to let trivial things like access to certain servers hold us back. We will try and build relationships within the organization to help us move forward. We will build organizations relationship within our clients that a lot of them don't even internally have. Just because we're that passionate, we're that driven, you're not going to find someone that takes more ownership of a solution and a project than we would.
Thank you, Wesley. Andrew?
I think, while I agree with Wesley, we do take ownership. We're very precious about our work in the sense of we want to do the right thing every time. But also, we will always be honest with you about solutions. You know, whether or not you take the advice or you decide to go in a different direction, you know, our teams their job is to tell you what is right for your business or the problem you're trying to solve. And we will always be honest about, you know, the limitations that we have or the limitations your systems have. And I think that's valuable because a lot of times people will just kind of say yes we'll do this thing and never tell you when there's going to be a hurdle. And so when it goes live and there's this hurdle, they're like, why didn't you tell me? But that's something we will always do, is be honest with you about the things that are going to come your way.
Radical honesty.
Yes.
We don't always sugarcoat it, but we are direct and we say it like it is. We tell you the truth.
Yeah, you know, so as I often make this comment, right? I've been at Retro for just over 5 years now, and in my other executive roles, I've never been challenged as much as I have in the last 5 years by the staff at Retro. And when I say challenge, it's the radical honesty. It's asking questions. It's pushing for answers. It's trying to get to the bottom of something. And I can tell you now, for the clients that we deal with, it's imperative to them that we don't sugarcoat stuff. We have a discussion. We are consultancy, right? We're not contractors. We get into an environment and we add value from the time we get into that environment. And part of our value is asking the difficult questions. It's pushing to get to what the value is. There was a question on one of the other forums about the culture at Retro, and I think that is really one of our strongest pillars that we hang off, is because we want people to be fully fledged consultants. We teach them how to be politely ask difficult questions, raise controversial topics and ideas, because by surfacing those sort of things, our clients get the best value out of it in the long run. So, and on that, any closing thoughts? I know you guys have done really well. There might be a career in television.
Please no.
No, definitely not. Just stick to development.
Yes, I prefer writing codes. Prefer building systems.
Any closing thoughts on digital transformation and Retro?
So, for me, digital transformation is a journey that you need to go on. We try and approach it more from a partnership perspective, because we want long-lasting relationships with our clients. So we try and understand their current concerns and the current problems that they have, but we also try and see what their long-term goals are for the next 4 to 5 years, to see how we can align with what those goals are and how we can make them implement those goals, get them there quicker than, instead of 5 years, get them there in 3 years or in 4 years. So for us, we don't just see our clients as someone that pays us to do the work. We see them as a collaborative partnership where we actively work together to get to the goals, to make their organization more competitive, get them more successful, because their successes is our successes. So we build off of that.
Thank you, Riz.
I think for me, it's just saying that digital transformation is a requirement in this day and age, and that, you know, doing it to the benefit of your institution and your users, you can never go wrong, but always to just try and employ the right tactics and the right kinds of teams at the right time.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, the key point there is there's no one size fits all when it comes to digital transformation. As we've discussed, right? These could be vast end-to-end through the organization. Could be a product, a service, a tool that's offered in a part of the organization, but it still hangs off the back ends and it needs to be integrated, and it needs to be part of this long-term strategy, right? It's hard to head off on a journey when you're not sure where you're going, because then anywhere will do, right? It's important to actually understand where you're going to. So I see there has been a bit of a spike on the website traffic, and for those of you wondering about our website is designed for our people. It is we are people business, and the type of individuals we attract and we keep are smart, talented, committed, and our website's based on that. Our clients are we generally obtain our clients through our networks, our referrals, people we've worked with successfully in the past, people that have moved. And so as a result, when you go to the Retro website, it's not your typical, this is what we do, it's about who we are, what we stand for, what our values are, what our belief is. Ladies and gentlemen, Wes, thank you very much. Andrea, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us on our very first LinkedIn Live broadcast. It was a lot less stressful than I had originally thought it was for the last 3 days. So thank you very much. Thanks for the commitment. Thanks for the update. And remember, you want to talk to us about software design or development, please feel free to reach out either via LinkedIn or one of our other channels to have a conversation about how we as Retro can add value to your digital transformation. Thank you very, very much for your time.